Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling. I shall see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today, where we'll be relaxing as per usual. I might take a break at least from discussing Japan holiday, not because Japan holidays run out of things to talk about. There's so many things to talk about. In fact, I would say there's almost too many things to talk about in the best way possible. But just to sort of like actually interweave some, conversations about my actual life. Well, not my actual life, but ongoings of my actual life, which of course means D&D more than anything. Because those are ones which actually make for good stories, I'd say. But good evening, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's at 8:24 PM. I can't read on Friday, June 19th, 2026. Yeah. But yeah, just have a little bit of a catch up with me and me. I would say with me and you, but I mean, you're like, I'm the only one here right now, so. And I'm just recording this before I go join my friends and we do a little bit of art club drawing. Yeah. Oh, today, grand finale. Amazing digital circus. Oh, I guess tomorrow then I'll probably talk about digital circus rather than Japan stuff. But you are Kitch, I'm pretty sure. Ah, so close. Who's Kit? Wikipedia Kit. A red and grey squirrel? Okay, no, this is who I was thinking. Okay, it's a kangaroo. you can see why I thought your name was Kit. I saw we saw Benjamin as well around here somewhere. Yeah, I mean, I guess that is, to be fair. Tomorrow I will end up talking about Amazing Digital Circus. Because the finale is today, but I don't think it will be out by the time I upload this video. Or if it is, it's going to be relatively close, I think. Digital Circus, episode 10. Oh, episode 10. What am I doing? Episode 9. Glitch spoilers? What? Time? No, I want a timer. What's going on? Glitch don't... Upcoming, when is it? Okay, so it does come out by the time this gets uploaded. Well, I want to dedicate a full episode to it, so I need to get my thoughts in order. I'm very excited for it, so hopefully you've watched it by this point, if it comes out. I'm not going to spoil anything of this one, but I very much like it. But I'm also a very character-driven story person, so... I have ordered all the plushies of the main cast. They're on their way and they're being, I think, delivered individually. So I'm going to have just an absolutely insane amount of packages come in like 2 weeks' time or something. But I have like individual trackings for each one, and I'm like, okay. Well, actually, I don't have it in. Thankfully, I have one tracking number because it tracks by order number. But then it's just like order 1, order 2, order 3. It was like 7 different orders. But yeah, I ordered quite a few things because I'm like, I want to support this, support Glitch Productions, support Gooseworks, support indie animation, things like this existing. But yeah, what was I going to talk about? I think I'm mainly going to talk about D&D. It's so interesting, D&D right now, because I have one group, Friendly Fires they're called, who basically finished off their second quote story arc, third story arc, depending on how you might view it. I would say it was probably Act 3 in their campaign. Act 2 and 3 were just kind of in the same sort of location. It was like the first act or second act. Act 1 being in like the introductory sort of area. And we had like an intermission between Act 1 and Act 3. Well, Act 2. Well, now we're having an intermission between Act 3 and Act 4. Which I have an idea of what Act 4 is going to be. But I was like, I'll let Act 3 be a bit of a longer one. Because they didn't have a very long intermission between Act 1 and Act 2. And I kind of want something which feels not that like lore heavy. Something where they can just sort of very freely roleplay in a different environment. And it not being all that stressful, etc, etc. So we're basically in a fairy tale land right now. And I wanted it to feel kind of low stakes. I wanted it to feel like a change up, to give them a little bit of like a taste of something different. But I also, yeah, I didn't want it to stray too far. So like, obviously I had to, like, I'm not going to change their characters out for something, but I introduced like a different combat system, for example, which I wanted it to feel a bit more sort of puzzle adjacent rather than like a power, because there's a weird sort of power balancing with mine, because I don't do a lot of combat with that group. Which means that the combats, I feel like I had to tune a bit stronger for them to feel like they're impactful. Because they're basically like completely well rested almost between every single fight. you know, X amount of encounters a day, which, you know, I think both my campaigns probably shoot under that a lot, which is not a bad thing necessarily. I think it's just a different campaign. It just means that rules don't necessarily work out the same. Should I be employing whatever it's called? You are, hold on, I know your name. Portia. Should I be employing the system of like realism or whatever, where rests are X, Y, Z length of time? Nah, I'm not going to do that. But yeah, so they're in a fairy tale land. It's quite low stakes, I like to think. It sort of allows them to be a bit more sort of relaxed about things. They have a pretty set story that they're following. It's just more like how they respond to it, hopefully. So I think I hope it would take like the edge off a little bit. You're Butch, I think. So yeah, they're having basically really cute, fluffy, like rainbows and unicorns sort of time right now. And it's very cute, it's very sweet. And then the other campaign, they're a little bit behind. They haven't finished their Act 3 yet. So it's, I mean, someone should put together a compilation, I suppose, of all the D&D stories and trying to figure out what on earth the plot is, but of my campaigns. But they basically kind of aborted their Act 2, like, prematurely, like, before I intended them to. I did want them to see Act 2 at least to a somewhat conclusion, but, you know, some decisions were made, and they've decided to pivot to Act 3 because they needed to lay low for a while, essentially. So they're doing a different character. They're basically hard pivoted from one character's, you know, motivational story, as it ties into the grand scheme of things, and to another character's. And it's very interesting, shall we say. So they've basically been on this really long pilgrimage, which is meant to be a pilgrimage of like intense, like only the strongest warriors. But supposedly no one has ever survived this pilgrimage, and they're like, let's send it. So they're in the last part of the pilgrimage, which is like the most brutal part, and as they're finding out, they're finding why it's so brutal. But they made some interesting decisions, which I can see the through line for why they've made them. But they also, you know, are insane at the same time. So essentially, one of where do I even start? The first thing is that basically I introduced a mechanic where they see basically spirits of those who are past. I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler at this point anymore. I think they've basically figured it out. Well, kind of, like, it's weird. It's like amalgamations of spirits and memories at the same time. But it's like, yeah, they see things like ghosts and stuff. And they found out that basically telling these ghosts that they're not, or these memories that they're not real, because it took a form of an NPC who they have met who should not have been there whatsoever. They found out that if they told them, yeah, you're not real, we know you're not a real thing, they transform, get angry, and attack them. So then, like, okay, locked in. That's something, you know, this is my game design brain on. I'm like, I'm going to introduce this mechanic early so they understand it and try and sort of interface with it. We also discovered some other strange things about that, which we didn't realise at the time, but now have started questioning a bit more, which I won't spoil because I don't think they've gotten the heart of the issue yet. But there's some intrigue going on there. But then, you know, later on, they basically come across like a larger mirage where it looks like a town that they started in, their first act town, which they obviously were like, this doesn't make sense. Either we were teleported here randomly, or, you know, this is another illusion. And then they realise it's an illusion pretty quickly. And then one of the players basically, they find out that they can basically summon a lot of the other characters that they met here by being like, hey, what happened to this character? And thinking about this character, and then that character appears like as a similar sort of memory hallucination thing. So they ended up summoning like 13 of them, and then one of the characters basically goes, I'm going to stand up on a table and tell them all they're not real, and then he like really persuades and intimidates them. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not sure why you did this, but then they all basically transform in some way or another. And then they basically, the session before this session, they had like a very intense session of trying to escape, which they managed to do, just from some lucky initiative rolls and some lucky not the enemies missing them. Some smart retorts, I suppose, about behaviour or how enemies' mechanics works, and then me contemplating how this monster would try and attack them. So really, should they have survived? I think, you know, they've actually played it honestly pretty strategically well. Like, I was very happy with him, like, discussing, being like, let's do this, let's X, Y, Z. You know, there's something to be said where it's like, well, they can't diegetically talk about this in real time. You know, you can't strategize for 15 minutes in a 6-second turn. Yes, that's true. But also, you know, the characters have grown up their entire lives with complete mastery over this sort of thing. They're not, you know, separated by 1 week of trying to remember how mechanics works and things like that. I think it's fair for a mechanics-based thing to be like, let's discuss above board what we can do. Especially if it's not lore. Like, if it's a lore-related thing, then I think that's something different. But I think it's like hey, what sort of things can you do? Because the characters would know each other. That's my thing. You know, everyone's got their own different levels of suspension of disbelief, and I don't think there's anything wrong if you're just like, oh, characters should only communicate with 6 seconds that they can on their turn. Fair enough. I just think you can get more out of it if you bend those rules. I mean, that's not even an official rule. I think that's just a very intense role-playing rule, I think, which I would say strays too far from what would probably be actually fun to engage with, but your mileage may vary depending on what you like. Anyway, side tangent, done. So they basically escape through that combat by the skin of their teeth. It's incredible, you know, it's a miracle, and yeah. I did say to them that, like, if they chose to fight it, it's probably, like, a lot harder than I expected that the final act, not the final act, the act, the final boss of this act to be. It's a pretty difficult fight. But yeah, so they've escaped and they run away. They've made backwards progress and that sort of thing. They're just trying to sort of recoup and rest. They basically have a long rest, like, super early, because they're like, we have no resources right now, we might as well. So they do. And then the other sort of backstory is one of my characters, one of the players, has a deity not in the official pantheon, but, you know, a deity nonetheless. That exists, that's fine. But this deity has been, like, very toxic in a way, and very sort of motivated by the thrill of a hunt. And they've recently realized that this deity is actually a demon, not like a quasi-divine that they thought before, and doesn't necessarily have their followers' interest in mind necessarily. Or not, who knows. So they're very, like, the way they're portrayed is very, very sort of, like, self-centered, very, like, toxic masculinity, sort of divine. So the player character, you know, honestly, I think great sort of role-playing moment, said, okay, I basically, like, after having this one conversation or whatever, like, I renounce my deity, you know. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm not going to use these weapons. I'm going to basically disable all these, like, gifts that they have given me. And I went, wow, what a crazy decision, risky decision, because they're literally on a combat-based pilgrimage, and they are basically the main damage dealer of the team. And this is their pilgrimage. But it's very, I was like, I respect it as a lore decision. That is a crazy self-imposed debuff to put on yourself. And it's going to have, you know, obviously I was like, are you sure you want to do this? Because this is going to have pretty strong consequences. Like, and he was like, yeah. I think this is probably the player who fears their character death the least, I would say, so fair enough. But there's a history of this character, basically, as they get more and more, like, they've been overcome with, like, bloodlust, essentially, where they've been in combat before, then suddenly, like, towards the end of a combat, like, the adrenaline keeps going, and then, like, at one point they've even attacked their allies once. They discovered during a long rest that if he tries and starts thinking about, you know, attacking and violent, anything which could be sort of construed as something which would be the domain of his demon deity, the deity's influence starts to come back. What that means, who knows, but then it's wild that this came from one of the more sane, more lore-driven players of my group, or that campaign, I suppose. Well, that group. I would say that she's kind of like an investigator of the secrets of the world, is probably how I put it. Suggests for that player to basically bait their deity in, let them take over and then just fight through it. And I was like, whoa, that's a crazy thing to suggest, because that could go horribly, horribly wrong if it doesn't work. So they were just like, there's no way this person fails their saving throw they need to save on. Lo and behold, they rolled a 3, which fails the saving throw. And then I have this impromptu, basically boss fight, which comes out where they are attacking their own allies as they are overtaken by the bloodlust, essentially. which was almost another TPK, can I say, because it was meant to be quite a strong fight. And it wasn't something which I was like, I didn't think you were going to do this now. Fortunately for me, I am very prepared. But I had actually thought about the mechanics of what this fight would have been like. I just didn't think it would be at this point. So I had them written down, like in my like rough notes, and I was like, okay, well, I gotta like transfer them real quick. I gotta like figure out what this is gonna look like. I gotta improvise and adapt a bit because I don't have a stat block, of course, ready to go, but I only have like certain effects which are in action. And it was basically, yeah, like a PvP kind of boss fight, where basically one of my players got to play the boss, and the others had to basically shut him down. Absolutely insane. Was it almost another TPK? I think it very well could have been. I think it very well could have been a TPK, because one of the mechanics of that fight is that the boss basically gets stronger and stronger the more times they attack. And it was very, very lucky because he had basically discarded all his weapons before. Like, he was basically fighting only with his fists, because if he had a weapon, it would have been devastating. But yeah, I mean, that wasn't the intention of how I thought the fight was going to go, because I was like, in my mind, I was like, there was always a possibility that something like this would happen, but I would be like, they would be more prepared for it. They would want to plan ahead. They wanted to have like contingencies in of what would happen, and they just kind of sent it, to be honest. I just think it's the funniest thing that it came from probably one of the more sane player or characters, I suppose, in that campaign. The one who was much more rational about things, and to be fair, also does tend to be quite proactively rational about things, like talking people down, being like, that's a bad idea, don't do that, but they also do instigate things if they think it's not going to have a serious consequence. She even said afterwards she would have felt so bad if it resulted in a TPK. But it was so random, because I was like, what is going on? Because I'd planned that session out, and I was like, it's going to be very low-key. It's probably going to be a bit of a roleplay heavy, maybe a bit more of a lore heavy session now, because they had just had like intense combats. Something to sort of give them a break, as they sort of, well, probably be a bit more lay low, you know, they probably won't go so rashly into things, and they just rashly try and summon a god and try and beat them. It's so funny. I'm like, why would you do that? I don't know. But they did, and they survived, so there you go. So I basically made a meme, which is basically describing the two campaigns, one being the fact that one of the campaigns is just like hell itself, like brimstone and fire, surrounded by monsters, but dying, almost dying at every opportunity, and then the other campaign's like la-di-da-di-da, fairy tale, once upon a time, sort of land. It's just a really, really weird contrast to starting about on Monday and then going to Wednesday, just Monday being like, and the little dog tried with all his might, and he picked up the sword and swung it with one swift blow, or something like that. And then on Wednesday just being like, you're surviving at the edge of your life, you're down to your last rations, but you know you don't have enough for the entire party, but you lie to them, you keep going as you wipe the blood from your mouth, or something like that. Obviously not that extreme, but it's very funny. Yeah, I think it is fun making memes to do with the actual campaigns themselves, very specifics. It gets the sort of reflection of me as the DM across, being like, what do I think of this exact situation? So I'll say what I think so far. Friendly Fire, you're doing great work. Friendly Fire, you're doing great work. I hope it's good fun. Silali wonders, what on earth are you doing? In the most loving way possible. They are both such fun campaigns, so I'm very thankful for them. They're just very different campaigns, I think is what I mean to say. So yeah, on that note, I think I'll go around this episode off here, and I will go join my friends. Like, all my friends are there now doing drawing clubs, so I'll go join them. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been dazzling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now it's our farewell. So until next time, bye bye for now.